An individual without a home was escorted into the courtroom, facing accusations of loitering and creating a public disturbance. He lacked legal representation and presented no counter-argument, merely remaining quiet with an abstracted look. The presiding judge browsed his case documents, then paused. "Your name is," her voice faltered. What could cause an ordinary name to render an entire courtroom hushed, as if at a solemn commemoration? Raymond L. Hayes had established himself as a consistent presence in the downtown Chicago environment over the preceding 15 years. Around 75 years of age, his once tall physique had become gaunt due to advancing years and his situation. His white hair, lengthy and untidy, lay beneath a worn military cap that had significantly faded from its initial hue. His tattered army jacket, now excessively large for him, draped from his gaunt shoulders, resembling an artifact from a bygone era. Each day, Raymond would situate himself on the identical bench in front of the public library, irrespective of the weather conditions. In contrast to other individuals experiencing homelessness who overtly solicited money or caused disruptions, Raymond preserved a respectable quietude. He did not request funds, nor did he trouble those walking past. Rather, he would remain seated in silence, sometimes jotting notes in a diminutive, worn-out notebook using a pencil remnant he stored behind his ear. The library personnel had become familiar with his regular appearance. A few even acknowledged him with a slight bow of the head or placed coffee close by on especially frigid mornings. A small number observed that he would occasionally peruse books left on the exterior return trolley, his gaze systematically scanning the pages before he meticulously put them back. One Tuesday towards the end of January, a gentle snowfall commenced over the urban area. The ambient temperature had decreased considerably during the night, causing the sidewalks to become slippery with ice. Raymond reached his customary location, cleared snow off the bench, and took a seat. After some time, possibly in an effort to create heat, he started to hum quietly what seemed to be a traditional military cadence. A newly employed security officer at the library observed Raymond and grew worried that his unseemly appearance might discourage visitors. As Raymond's soft singing persisted, the guard contacted law enforcement, reporting a vagrant causing a disruption outside the library. A pair of officers attended to the dispatch. Officer Jenkins, a novice with only 6 months of service, moved forward with care. "Sir, we have been informed of complaints regarding loitering and noise. I will require some form of identification." Raymond raised his head gradually, his time-worn face devoid of expression. He remained silent, but delved into his jacket pocket and retrieved a severely deteriorated plastic card, illegible from prolonged use. "This does not constitute valid identification, sir," Jenkins affirmed. "Do you possess any other form?" Raymond merely moved his head from side to side. "Sir, you are not permitted to remain in this location. It contravenes city ordinances to loiter in public areas," Jenkins persisted, becoming increasingly uneasy with Raymond's reticence. "I must request that you accompany us." Raymond offered no resistance. He meticulously shut his notebook, placed it within his jacket, and rose without voicing any objection. The officers, who had anticipated opposition, were taken aback by his tranquil acquiescence as they led him to the police vehicle. At the precinct, Raymond underwent the same procedures as numerous other homeless persons that week. He was photographed, his fingerprints were taken, and he was given a court appearance for the next morning. Nobody inquired about his military jacket or the dog tags concealed under his multiple garments. In the temporary detention cell overnight, he remained seated on a bench by the wall, completely motionless, his gaze locked on an unseen distant spot. The following morning, the municipal courtroom bustled with the typical assortment of those accused of minor infractions: public intoxication, shoplifting, traffic violations, and a number of homeless people facing charges for different nuisance-related acts. Raymond's case was listed at the end of the court's agenda. Judge Nora Bennett conducted the proceedings with brisk, formal precision. At the age of 61, having dedicated more than 20 years to the judiciary, she was recognized for her straightforward methodology and impartial judgments. Her graying hair was drawn back into a neat bun, her facial expression consistently grave behind her reading spectacles. The courtroom atmosphere was close and congested, filled with a continuous hum of hushed dialogues and the rustling of documents. From the public seating area, a youthful legal intern, Sarah Martinez, watched the events, diligently recording observations for her law school practical training. When Raymond's case was announced, he failed to react. The bailiff had to lightly touch his shoulder. "They are summoning you, sir." Raymond got up gradually, his actions hampered by arthritis and the chill of the night spent in detention. A number of onlookers crinkled their noses as the odor of unlaundered garments permeated the chamber. If Raymond perceived their responses, he showed no sign of it. Judge Bennett took the file without raising her eyes. Case number 47,293, Commonwealth vs. Her voice diminished as she perused the name. Upon looking up, her complexion had become pale. "Is your name Raymond L. Hayes?" she inquired, her usually firm voice unexpectedly tremulous. The courtroom became utterly quiet. When all others avert their gaze, only one's moral sense endures. "Are you interested in learning the subsequent events?" Judge Nora Bennett seldom showed her feelings in the courtroom. More than 20 years of judicial service had instilled in her the understanding that preserving professional impartiality was crucial for dispensing justice equitably. Yet, as she now gazed at the homeless individual standing before her, an event had evidently disturbed her equanimity. "Mr. Hayes," she stated after regaining her composure, her tone gentler than any of the regular attendees had previously experienced. "Were you in the armed forces?" Raymond's distant look appeared to sharpen somewhat upon hearing the question. "Yes, ma'am," he answered, his voice hoarse from lack of use. "In what capacity did you serve?" Judge Bennett urged, putting the case documents completely to one side. "Alpha Company, 17th Special Forces Group, Pleiku Province, Vietnam." Raymond responded automatically, as though repeating details he was conditioned never to lose, despite the fading of other recollections. An uneasy quietness persisted in the courtroom. The prosecuting attorney, who had been partly asleep during what he anticipated would be standard cases, sat up in his seat, abruptly attentive. Judge Bennett's hand reached into her robe pocket, extracting a diminutive item encased in transparent plastic, a kind of medallion smoothed by years of being held. She gazed at it for a moment before speaking to Raymond once more. "Mr. Hayes, a soldier from that very unit, saved me when I was a young girl. He transported me 3 kilometers to a safe location amidst a mortar barrage. I never learned his name, but I have cherished his unit medallion throughout these many years." The court official, perceiving that a momentous event was transpiring, rapidly accessed further details on his computer. "Your Honor, our files verified that he is Raymond Lawrence Hayes, Staff Sergeant, who received an honorable discharge in 1983. The youthful intern, Sarah, tentatively lifted her hand. After Judge Bennett signaled her consent, she rose. "Your Honor, with your leave, I consult the military service database as part of my pre-law veterans advocacy studies. Mr. Hayes was awarded both the Silver Star and the Purple Heart, the Silver Star for spearheading an evacuation of injured soldiers under intense enemy fire, and the Purple Heart for wounds incurred while protecting his comrades during an ambush." Judge Bennett took off her spectacles, showing eyes that had become surprisingly tearful. "At the age of 8 years old, my family found ourselves in the midst of gunfire while visiting kin employed at a medical outpost close to the Vietnamese frontier. In the ensuing pandemonium, I was parted from my parents. A soldier discovered me concealed in a drainage ditch, frightened and solitary." She paused, obviously composing herself before proceeding. "The serviceman transported me through areas of active fighting until we arrived at a secure location. He presented me with this medallion and urged me to remain courageous. 2 days thereafter, my parents located me at a field hospital. I never ascertained the soldier's name, only that he belonged to a special forces unit, yet I recall his eyes." Judge Bennett examined Raymond's countenance with intensity. "Those very eyes are regarding me at this moment." Raymond's demeanor stayed mostly the same, yet a subtle spark appeared in his eyes, a fleeting link to a past he could not completely retrieve. "Do you recall Cam Bay, 1968? A young girl parted from her relatives," the judge inquired, her voice scarcely audible. Raymond's forehead creased in concentration. Numerous children. We endeavored to assist all of them, he replied indistinctly. The law enforcement officer who had taken Raymond into custody moved uneasily. He inclined towards his colleague and murmured, "Have we just apprehended a decorated war veteran?" Sarah, the legal intern, persisted with her spontaneous investigation on her tablet device. "Your Honor, his service history contains additional information. Following Vietnam, Mr. Hayes functioned as a training officer up to his discharge. Based on Veterans Affairs documentation, he was employed as an interstate bus driver for almost 10 years subsequently." What transpired? Judge Bennett inquired, aiming her question at both Raymond and the entire courtroom. Sarah navigated through further data. A discontinuity exists in his records subsequent to 1994. It seems he was implicated in a severe accident when another vehicle collided with his bus. He sustained considerable head trauma. Medical notations mention memory impairment, specifically concerning short-term recall and an incapacity to handle intricate duties. A court official who had been positioned near the wall and was himself a Vietnam veteran came forward. "Your Honor, if I might add, numerous veterans from that period experienced complications with their documentation within the system. If he was unable to recollect details accurately or pursue matters with the VA, he could have been overlooked, particularly given his memory difficulties." Raymond remained quiet during this entire conversation about his life, sometimes giving a slight nod as though affirming particulars he could only partly remember. Judge Bennett spoke to him directly once more. "Mr. Hayes, are there any relatives we might get in touch with?" Raymond gradually shook his head. "They are no longer here," he stated plainly, providing no further details. The prosecutor, acknowledging the atypical direction the hearing had taken, rose. "Your Honor, in view of these exceptional conditions, the Commonwealth wishes to ask for a postponement to reevaluate the accusations." Judge Bennett assented before delivering an unparalleled declaration. "This court shall halt all proceedings concerning Mr. Hayes forthwith. He should not be seated in the defendant's position." Whispers circulated throughout the courtroom. The officer who had apprehended Raymond lowered his gaze, examining his footwear with abrupt fascination. "Moreover," Judge Bennett went on, "I am formally withdrawing myself from this case owing to the evident link between myself and the accused." Nevertheless, prior to this, she descended from the judicial platform, an action she had never taken mid-session in her whole career, and went towards Raymond. Positioned in front of him, Judge Bennett's diminutive figure appeared unexpectedly more youthful, more exposed. "I never received the opportunity to express my gratitude appropriately," she stated, her professional composure briefly abandoned. "The medallion you presented to me, I kept it with me throughout law school, during my initial cases, and following my appointment to the judiciary. When situations appeared insurmountable, I would grasp it and recall the appearance of true bravery." Raymond gazed at her, a glimmer of acknowledgement passing over his time-worn face. His hand ascended gradually, not fully reaching his forehead but implying the gesture of a salute. "Merely performing my duty, ma'am," he uttered gently, repeating phrases he likely voiced innumerable times in a previous existence. "No one is abandoned. I am unsure of your reaction, but this segment deeply affected me. Enter respect if it also resonated with you." Judge Bennett promptly declared a 30-minute recess, directing her clerk, "Get in touch with the Department of Veterans Affairs Emergency Response Unit. Inform them we are dealing with a high-priority case concerning a decorated Vietnam veteran and locate an individual from the Veterans Legal Aid Society for me." Then, as the courtroom cleared, Bennett herself escorted Raymond to her private office, an unparalleled deviation from standard procedure that caused court personnel to exchange puzzled looks. The youthful intern Sarah was unexpectedly asked to accompany them at the judge's behest. "You appear proficient in maneuvering through the military databases," Bennett clarified. "That skill will be necessary." Inside her private office, Judge Bennett dispensed with all judicial decorum. She offered Raymond a cup of coffee, which he took but did not consume, his hands shaking somewhat. "Mr. Hayes, I intend to assist you, but I must comprehend the events following your accident," she stated softly. "How did a distinguished veteran find himself without a home?" Raymond's reply emerged gradually in disjointed pieces separated by the voids in his recollection. "The headaches commenced. I could no longer concentrate on driving. I lost my commercial license and subsequently the apartment." He gestured imprecisely, the sequence of events evidently muddled in his thoughts. Sarah, who had been quickly entering information on her tablet, raised her head. "I believe I have located something, Your Honor." As per VA records, Mr. Hayes had been obtaining disability benefits up to 1997, at which point they abruptly ceased. There is a notation regarding non-response to certification inquiries and return correspondence. Addressee not found. A bureaucratic abyss, Bennett murmured. If he was unable to recall updating his address or replying to official documents, he would consequently have vanished from the system, Sarah concluded. Beyond the confines of the chambers, information had already started to circulate. A court stenographer who had observed the atypical events got in touch with his editor regarding a possible human interest piece. Judge suspends trial upon identifying homeless defendant as war hero. In a matter of hours, the narrative had been disseminated by local news organizations. By nightfall, it was set to gain nationwide notice with headlines underscoring the extraordinary happenstance. Judge identifies homeless man as soldier who rescued her. Upon the resumption of court, the public gallery was filled with an increased number of reporters and intrigued spectators. Judge Bennett had donned an alternative robe, her formal one, typically kept for particular court occasions. Additionally, she was accompanied by guests, 2 delegates from the Department of Veterans Affairs and a gentleman with silver hair in an immaculately fitted suit, presented as Colonel James Whitmore, retired, currently affiliated with the Veterans Legal Defense Alliance. Prior to this court continuing, Bennett declared, "I desire to issue a statement for the official record. The events of this morning have brought to light details of considerable consequence concerning the defendant, Raymond Lawrence Hayes." She indicated Colonel Whitmore, who rose and spoke to the courtroom. "Following an examination of accessible documents, we can verify that Staff Sergeant Hayes was, in fact, involved in a covert operation designated Rising Fog in 1971. This mission entailed the extraction of American POWs from a location situated just beyond the Laotian border. The operation stayed classified up to 2008, signifying that Hayes himself was precluded from ever publicly admitting his participation." A low hum of conversation moved through the courtroom. Judge Bennett proceeded. Furthermore, initial inquiries verified that after sustaining a traumatic brain injury in 1994, Mr. Hayes suffered considerable memory impairment, which probably hindered his ability to manage the administrative procedures required to preserve his benefits and accommodation. The prosecutor, now entirely cognizant of the case's importance, rose and stated, "Your Honor, considering these exceptional conditions, the Commonwealth requests the dismissal of all accusations against Mr. Hayes with prejudice." "It is so ordered," Bennett replied without delay. However, this court's actions will not conclude with simply dismissing the charges. A profound injustice has occurred, not due to any single person, but as a result of a system that did not acknowledge and assist a man who endangered all he had in devotion to his nation. The delegates from the VA came forward, holding a file of papers. "We have initiated urgent reinstatement processes for Mr. Hayes's benefits," one clarified. "Retroactive payments will necessitate further processing duration, yet we have approved immediate provision of housing and medical aid." While these declarations were being made, the narrative kept disseminating across social media platforms. The hashtag Honor Hayes started to gain national traction, along with posts voicing indignation that a distinguished veteran had been left homeless and was confronting criminal accusations. Organizations for veterans mobilized with exceptional swiftness. By the middle of the afternoon, delegates from 3 separate organizations had reached the courthouse, each providing aid with accommodation, healthcare, and legal assistance to reinstate Hayes's complete benefits. An especially poignant instance took place when a contingent of active-duty military personnel in Chicago for training maneuvers appeared in full-dress uniform to stand respectfully at attention outside the courthouse. Within, Judge Bennett arrived at an unparalleled determination. "This court shall assemble for a special commendation session tomorrow at 9 a.m. Although I have formally withdrawn from Mr. Hayes's case, I shall oversee this particular session acting as a private individual and as one who benefited from Mr. Hayes's bravery." That night, Raymond was taken not to a shelter for the homeless, but to a personal room at the VA Medical Center where physicians commenced thorough assessments of his physical and cognitive condition. The preliminary outlook was carefully positive. Although certain memory impairments seemed irreversible, targeted therapy could potentially aid in retrieving more pieces of his history and enhance his overall well-being. Judge Bennett, having finished her court duties, went to see him there, taking the small medallion that had linked their existences over many years. "Do you recall presenting this to me?" she inquired, setting it in his hand. Raymond examined it attentively, rotating it multiple times. "Occasionally, memories return in fragments," he stated deliberately. "A burning village, a small girl weeping beneath a culvert. So many frightened gazes." Bennett assented. "That was indeed I. You advised me to be courageous, that assistance was on its way. Then you transported me to a secure location." "Merely performing my duty," Raymond reiterated, the expression appearing to function as both an authentic reply and a standard response when his memory faltered. "Your duty preserved my life," Bennett answered, "and presently perhaps I can contribute to preserving yours." The subsequent morning, the courthouse was the setting for a remarkable spectacle. The special assembly declared by Judge Bennett had attracted hundreds of participants, veterans currently serving military personnel, members of the press, and everyday individuals touched by Hayes's narrative. Bennett, attired not in her judicial vestments but in conventional civilian clothing, gave Raymond something he had been without for decades, a correctly documented form of identification. A group had labored throughout the night to assemble a full set of documents: a birth certificate, social security card, military ID, and Veterans Affairs identification card. "Mr. Hayes," she stated with formality, "representing a thankful nation and an especially thankful 8-year-old girl who matured due to your bravery, I restore to you your identity and your honor, although the latter was never truly absent." Raymond, now wearing fresh attire supplied by a veterans organization, received the papers with hands that shook less than on the previous day. For a fleeting instant, his military posture reappeared. Shoulders set back, chin raised. A glimpse of the youthful soldier he formerly was became apparent through the accumulated years of difficulty. The courthouse subsequently observed an event even more extraordinary. Judge Nora Bennett took off her judicial gown, descended from the bench, and moved toward Raymond with her hand outstretched. "Staff Sergeant Hayes, it is impossible for me to pronounce judgment on an individual to whom I am indebted for my very existence." The effect of the special assembly echoed well past the confines of the courtroom. By that same afternoon, the Chicago City Council had declared an urgent reevaluation of procedures for managing homeless veterans within the judicial framework. The office of the mayor put forth a mandate instructing police to verify military service prior to processing any homeless person for petty crimes. The most notable result, nonetheless, originated from the Department of Veterans Affairs, which proclaimed a novel program expressly created to locate and aid veterans with cognitive difficulties who had been overlooked by administrative systems. The initiative was to be called Operation Hayes, acknowledging the individual whose circumstances had revealed this vital deficiency in the system. As Raymond readied himself to depart from the courthouse, encircled by his recently established network of support, a journalist inquired, "Mr. Hayes, what is your feeling about being acknowledged after such a long time?" Raymond contemplated the query with the methodical cognitive approach characteristic of individuals with his kind of brain injury. Finally, he responded with unadorned dignity. "I did not return home anticipating celebrations, only a tranquil location to recollect my comrades who did not survive. Now, perhaps, I can commemorate them fittingly." Has an individual from your history ever resurfaced when you were least anticipating it? Share with us that instance of realization. 6 months following that momentous court session, Raymond Hayes relocated to a compact, neat flat within a supportive housing facility for veterans. The walls, previously unadorned, now exhibited framed pictures and papers detailing a life of dedication that had almost faded into obscurity. Every morning, Raymond would take a seat at a modest desk near the window, composing entries in a new leather-bound journal, a present from Judge Bennett. His physicians had recommended journaling as a therapeutic practice, a method to give outward expression to recollections that might otherwise vanish. These compositions, portions of his experiences during the war and his life thereafter, were being safeguarded in the archives of the National Veterans History Project. The bench situated outside the Chicago Public Library, where Raymond had previously sat unobserved, now featured a small bronze commemorative plate honoring Staff Sergeant Raymond L. Hayes and all veterans whose contributions should never be overlooked. The library personnel had initiated a dedicated veterans outreach initiative, guaranteeing that visitors, whether in search of information or merely refuge, were provided with suitable resources and treated with dignity. The courtroom in which Judge Bennett had identified her rescuer from long ago was likewise memorialized as the Hayes Chamber, under the motto, "Where justice bows to courage." This area was now exclusively assigned to veterans' cases, with skilled advocates in attendance at every hearing. Sarah Martinez, the law student whose investigative work had been instrumental in revealing Raymond's identity, altered her professional trajectory. Following her graduation, she became part of the Veterans Legal Defense Alliance, specializing in cases concerning veterans who had sustained traumatic brain injuries. During the orientation of new interns, she would frequently recount Raymond's narrative. "We do not pass judgment on individuals, rather we judge our deficient comprehension of them." Judge Bennett kept in consistent touch with Raymond, meeting him for coffee on alternate Sundays. Their discussions were frequently subdued, interspersed with the easy quietude of individuals who grasped that certain connections go beyond verbal expression. Periodically, she would present old photographs of Vietnam sourced from historical collections, aiding him in assembling remnants of his history. On the commemorative day of their courtroom reunion, local veterans arranged a modest ceremony to pay tribute to Raymond. Upon being invited to address the attendees, he neared the microphone with some hesitation, his phrasing meticulously selected and spoken at the measured speed of one who has acquired the skill to work around absent recollections. "An individual's name," he stated, surveying the assembled countenances, "can occasionally represent a whole narrative we have yet to discover." The chamber became quiet, taking in the deep veracity of his unadorned declaration. "Heroes are not invariably discovered atop pedestals," he went on, his voice gaining strength. "At times, they are seated silently in the chairs of defendants, overlooked by the same world they contributed to safeguarding." Judge Bennett, positioned in the foremost row, assented quietly, tears shimmering in her eyes. Raymond's concluding remarks on that occasion echoed throughout the chamber with a gentle force. "Attend before adjudicating, for the quietude of one who has suffered may articulate more powerfully than any rebuttal." These three philosophical musings were subsequently to be inscribed in bronze at the entryway of the Veterans Justice Center founded in his honor. A memento for all who passed through, signifying that concealed by every name is a narrative, behind every quietude is a self-denial, and preceding every judgment, comprehension should first exist. Justice might be postponed, yet it is never non-existent. Do not surrender when you are acting correctly.